This is Sunday, February 14. Happy Valentine's Day. This is podcast 49. And I thank everybody for coming to watch or listen to this. And this is going to be a quick one. It is Sunday, and there's not much going on with basketball. Most of the high school teams are playing down south. Some are finishing up. In the Northeast or East, a lot of the teams just are lucky if they get 10 games in. Crazy practice for events. There's some here and there, but people are basically lying where they say you can't go out of state to play. People are just ignoring it and doing it anyway. And out in the Midwest, they're playing, but it's a hit and miss based on if you're blue or red. Obviously, and sadly, that's the case. From a collegiate standpoint, schools are starting to opt out more and more. And we're going to see the biggest turnover in athletic directors probably in the history of college sports. I mean, everybody and their mothers retiring. Why? Pay cuts, furloughs. I'm getting out and getting my pension now at my highest year. And number two, they may cut my job. Number three, I don't need the stress of the finances coming. And the reason I say that to you, this month or this February 5th, Chronicle Higher Education, the front covers the unbearable cost of the empty campus. And if you can see that, there it is. And that says a lot. And there's a lot of stuff in here about, it's COVID is speeding changes in standardized testing. The associate professor trap. Moving up the ladder means dealing with endless bureaucracy. For many, it's not worth it. And they're the people who really teach the classes, but they don't get tenure. Some colleges radically altered their schedules in response to COVID-19. Here's what happened. The great calendar revamp, and we're going to have that probably in a future issue podcast here. Probably number 50 to talk about what the NCAA calendar is going to be like, because I see that going to be a major issue as the powers that be start to discuss what they're going to do with the rest of the year. Everybody's talking about, we're going to be open in June, we're going to be open in July, we're going to be open in August. And I'm like, as I said earlier, there's a school of thought to open up, and there's a school of thought to go back to the old, and there's a school of thought that there's not going to be any openness this summer because of cost and the prospects of vaccine. The problem becomes there's at least 28% of the population that is now, saying they're not getting vaccinated. You're talking about a rollout where you have to get not one shot, but two. So, and this is the big one. And I've heard nobody talk about this. Everybody's in these tiers and they're coming down, and you're in 1A or 1B. And I'm like, where are the students? Where are the student athletes? Where are the young players and young kids who could end up at a gym this summer? I got to believe everybody's going to have to wear a mask no matter what. But number two, what are you doing for the athlete? What happens if somebody gets COVID and it impairs their lungs, which means they can't breathe, which means it affects their ability to be an athlete down the road? Who are they going to blame? And if big companies and the NCAA wants to get involved in, quote, sanctioning events and stuff like that, and that's going to be another podcast, because that's something where the parents are going to have to rail against. But it's going to be crazy. Who's going to put their imprimatur from a corporate or higher level standpoint? And they can't put rules in because the NCAA is not their purview is not high school non-scholastic sports. It's only collegiate. And if they're trying to say it's about their coaches, it's another argument, which is if we look at NIL, is going to be probably on the table. So let's get to the news, and we'll move forward and get a lot of this done today. I want to try to make these quicker so you can have these in bite-sized bunches. That means I may have to do these a little more shorter instead of one long. Okay, I guess the big thing for the NCAA, they had something come out that the NCAA men's and women's basketball committee. The authority on conference championships should reflect current policy, which leaves decision-making at the conference and institutional level. That means if you're going to play in the championship, they want everybody to play. A lot of teams are opting out, as I said earlier. So basically, they're going to have to figure out how they want to do that, and are they going to take on the cost of all that COVID testing, et cetera, and living in another bubble, especially over Easter and all these spring dates. And if and really half the people are going online and taking it. So think about it. If you're not going to practice, you don't even need to be at school. You can go home. Think about that one, and go home and talk to your parents about, are you leaving and going into the transfer portal and jump in school like everybody did. And to repeat, in the last podcast I mentioned that in top football, at least 400 people, 400 less scholarships for the class of 21, and that meant that they got their players from the portal. And the rest of the class of 21, if they are going to sign anybody, they're going to take everybody from the portal with the rest of their scholarships. And that's a warning for basketball. That's a warning for the high school class of 21 and 22. If you're in 22, you better reclass. If you're if you think you're a mid, if you're like a top 200 player and below, you better think about reclassing. And if you're a top 100, 200 player, and you want to go to your quote dream school, you may want to reclass, because you may have a better shot at, because they're going to run out of rides in the class of 22, just like they are in 21, which means more pressure on 23s to not doodle around and think about, how many more offers am I going to get? Those days are, for right now, at an end. And if everybody's smart, they're not posting what they're getting. So let's move forward. So that means that the NCAA conferences and schools get to decide if they're going to the conference championship, which means that who's going to be eligible for the 64-team women's bracket in San Antonio. And right now, they're having, it's a tier 1 party. So if you're going, it's the team, the coaches, some administrators, necessary team personnel. That's it. They don't want to pay because they're going to have to do testing every 2-3 days during that entire stretch. That is a ton of money. And you'd be stunned, shocked how much money some of these schools raised just for testing, just to pay for the testing. That doesn't include anything else, no donation to the team or the school. We're talking donate just to cover testing. And some people actually did it. But they're saying all Tier 1 personnel will be required to have 7 consecutive daily negative tests, one of which must be a PCR test. All testing in San Antonio will be conducted by Diamond Health. Additionally, Tier 1 personnel will wear contact tracing devices at all times and be allowed up to 6 guests for games. That means the parents and who they maybe coach, or whoever, travel coach, high school, whoever's handling their transfer portal, who knows, they're going to be able to get a ticket. That means it's going to be a closed women's Final Four. There will be no general tickets. This means that everybody who's going right now, and from what I heard, that's what's going on. As for Division 2, they announced predetermined men's and women's basketball regional sites. Obviously, they're going with regionals. Regional quarterfinals games will begin March 13, followed by the semifinals March 14, the regional championship Tuesday, March 16. Winners will advance to the NCAA 2 Men's Elite 8 in Evansville on March 24 to 27. So, obviously, thank you, because they didn't bother to put the women's in this notice, but they're going to play their championship. Now, as for other news, one more. The Ivy League will break with its long-standing policy and allow this year's student-athletes to compete as grad students next season. Student-athletes must stay at the schools they are currently at to receive this one-time exemption and must be admitted to graduate school through regular channels. Are you serious? So if you want to stay next year in the Ivy for seniors, I thought they were getting it. Now you have to compete as a grad student. Talk about, oh yeah, we're giving you another year. Oh, but here's the caveat. Yeah, so what if you go to one school and you want to be a grad student in another school? No, Ivy League needs to figure that one out. Colleges that pay seven-figure salaries to coaches, dwarf salaries are paid to educators, and sometimes criticized for prioritizing athletes over academics. What if the tax law made those coaches' contracts even more expensive? Oh yeah, this is the one. Enter newly finalized Section 4960, the final regulation issued in January by the U.S. Department of Treasury. Certain types of nonprofits that employ coaches and other executives who earn more than $1 million annually in compensation are subject to a 21% excise tax on the portion of compensation exceeding $1 million. That means all those football coaches and those basketball coaches who are making stupid money, and they took it out of the university and put it from a nonprofit, which I said is the future. Well, guess what? Now they got a 21% tax because they're not going to hide behind the school's nonprofit status, which is how they were able to get away paying such exorbitant salaries and people not getting taxed. Well, that was always a big loophole, and I think I remember reading about that about 2.5 years ago when it was coming up. And I was like, wow, they actually put that in. Talk about how people are going to dance, and now it's going to have to be my media contract, or, you have to remember, every coach has a set salary with a university. They cannot exceed a certain range depending on where you are. How they structure your contract is based on other things: speaking engagements, TV show, radio show, local endorse, all this speaking engagements. That's all like put over there, so you make more of your money over there. That goes for assistant coaches. That'll be a big thing. Another one is the NC. Yeah. The Athletics Hourback reports a group of sports associations are pushing for a green light to evaluate in person when the April 15 recruiting dead period expires, pointing out Division II and III and NAIA have resumed recruiting safely. Meanwhile, the Football Oversight Committee has recommended extending the dead period through May 31st. Basically, no one wants to waste time planning football prospects' visits on campus in April, May if they're going to get canceled last minute anyway. They like clarity. The Division I Council could decide this doesn't need a one-size-fits-all solution, or that it does. A topic to keep an eye on. Division I Hourback adds, could make a decision on the issue next week or defer until March. They could just do it next week, but I got to believe they're going to defer to March because they're going to want to get a read on the COVID, which means that there's, if football's pushing back, they could extend to April 15 to June 1 or June 15. Why? It's about how many people are going to have the shots. And you really think they're inviting people on campus without shots or without a test or without a band? You have to remember, they just say if you're one of the Final Four, you got to wear a tracing band. Well, what's that mean? And how many students are going to lie, or parents are going to lie, oh yeah, I got my COVID test, I need to go visit the school and take the offer. Think about that one. That's why I think and plus we haven't even decided what's a calendar for the future. I mean, some of the stuff that they're talking about is just deadly, and it's possibly illegal, not in their view, but in the view of business and economics and business practices and fair markets, because the NCAA is delving into non-scholastic sports. So, and that's a whole other discussion. Let's see. The NCAA has filed out of bounds compiled. Oh, this is there's another tricky one. Remember when we talked about the NCAA marketplace and how they're going to have all these marketplaces and they're going to make the players pay to manage their social media, which means tax them and say, oh no, these sponsors are out of bounds because the school already has their sponsors. Well, how about this? Out of bounds, they compiled at least 50 teams across 16 Power 5 schools via public records. And they asked compiled their team rule books. And which dives into, here's one, contends that coaches and administrators are potentially impacting the future earnings potential of their student athletes based on the current team and department rules regarding social media. So, perfect example, you're at UConn. Gino traditionally says, hey, no social media. I think South Carolina may have that. There might be a number of schools that have that, but Gino's most traditionally known for it. Well, guess what? If that's your money, How are you taking a pay cut while he's earning his money and you're not? It's not about him. I'm just using that as an example. But obviously, all those schools and all those coaches, and that's just basketball. I mean, there's got to be men's basketball and football to do this too. But it said, and even Kansas women's volleyball said he might be, which he says might be the gold standard for progressive social media tips. Open Door Senior Director of Corporate Marketing, whatever on this could mean, post-NIL legislation. There's a likely scenario where the public will know which student athletes are earning the most off-field income and which school student athletes are earning the most opportunities. Once that out there in the open, good luck to the schools that are at the bottom of the list competing and recruiting. That's the big fear, that phrase. Once that's at what people are making, once that's out there in the open, good luck to the schools that are at the bottom of the list competing and recruiting. So, how do you go to a school if they're cutting on your social media and your chance to make $5,000 and they just shut that door? So now there's going to be probably a big discussion over the next few months or probably weeks about that. Everybody's in season, but I guarantee you as soon as the season's over, people are going to be in talking to their athletic director about what this means and how it impacts recruiting. A couple more things here. And I thought that was pretty big. The NCAA has filed a motion to dismiss academic performance program case. The NCAA and its members are united in the mission to provide a pathway to academic success and opportunity for college athletes who attend historically black colleges and universities. The claims in this lawsuit do not account for the number of steps the NCAA and schools and conferences have taken to support schools with limited resources, including HBCUs. If any HBCU does not meet academic obligations under membership rules, the policy and programs process provides flexibility to mitigate penalties respective to the mission and resources of the school. The NCAA operates a grant program for limited resource schools that have awarded more than $19 million, including $12 million to HBCUs to help student athletes earn their degrees. So, that means, the NCAA has rules as to standards you have to be able to meet to compete. So if those student athletes at those HBCUs don't meet those standards, then they can't play. But then the schools don't have the money to support them, which goes back to, and I'm going to repeat this repeatedly, the BLM, Black Lives Movement, raised, and the word is raised, $10.6 billion. And I hope the basketball community and every parent and every athlete is aware of that so that they can say, hey, how are we going to create change? Not give people administrative jobs because they're at the front of the line beating the drum. So now the person beating the drum or doing whatever is now like, oh yeah, I'll take that administrative job for 6 figures. What are you administrating? It's like they say always when you have those United Funds and all those different causes, like how much money is actually going to create change. And, my voice is not big enough to make that happen. It has to be a collective voice, just like that movement was. And so the people in the back of the line or in the back or sitting at home need to say, hey, what are we doing to change people's lives, change that journey? That's a lot of money, a lot of opportunity that can't be just pushed away. I hope something happens because, I'm going to repeat this also. If you don't believe me, go listen to Denzel Washington and listen to what he has to say about a lot of things, and you'll get a close-up statement as to what he thinks, what's going on, and he's a more viable voice than me, but I'm just letting you know that there's information out there. And sadly, today's world, it's everything's social media, and it's easy to believe what's going on with that when it's basically one voice. And I said before, Animal Farm, and 1984. It's all these social points of, I guess it was socialism and all that. So figure it out. Biggest issue for most parents and coaches right now is we're getting to the end of the season, April 15. What's the year going to look like coming after April? And I would suggest right now, this is going to be ongoing, that we're going to have more questions as we get into March, and then probably by mid-March, a lot of answers will come up for June and July. I expect June to be dead. I expect the fight for what's going to be open in July to happen. And from what I understand, there's some people behind the scenes with some corporations trying to push for something in August. If that happens, then you know that the calendar is not an institutional thing. It's a who's connected to who thing. So I'll leave it at that for now, and have a good Valentine's Day. Thank you for listening, and thank you.